How's it going? Dr. Tyler Pansner, and welcome to the full-length cell signaling model of disease course. This is aimed at beginning to show you an entirely new way of looking at how you pick which food, supplements, or lifestyle habits you should and shouldn't be doing. And trust me, once you see things from this angle, you will never be able to unsee it. This is extremely important information that I'm really excited to share with you. So to start things off, let's talk about an introduction to cells before we get into the pathways and things. So let's jump in. So first off, what is a cell? Well, a cell is the basic building block of all living things. We are all made up of cells. They make us, us. Here's a nice cartoon of a cell showing that it's essentially, in here, it's like a jelly-like substance called cytoplasm that holds many different things called organelles right here. We're not going to go deep into these, but mitochondria, you may recognize this from high school or middle school biology as the powerhouse of the cell. The job of this mitochondria is to make energy for the cell. Different organelles have different jobs or functions, and these are made up of proteins, DNA, RNA, lipids. These are fats that we consume from foods that we use in our own bodies, and carbohydrates, sugars that we eat from foods that fuel our cells. So, let's talk about how cells are organized within the body. Our body, I like to think of it as a perfectly orchestrated symphony. It's, once you really understand the nitty-gritty science, it's wild to me that our bodies exist as is. There is just so much going on all the time. The body needs to be finely organized in order to do these things. So we see here are some pictures of different cell types, and these are actually accurate in how they appear. We see different cells. These are all cells that are within each and every one of us. They all have the same genetic code, the same DNA, but they look very, very different because they are different types of cells. We don't just have one cell type in our whole body. Epithelial cells, they make up our skin. Bone cells make up our bones. Skeletal muscle cells make our muscles. Erythrocytes make the blood cells. So you see how different specific cell types, they join together to make up cell tissues. So a brain cell on its own is not a brain, it's a neuron. It comes to make up nervous system tissue, and all that tissue working together makes up our brain. And then that comprises, along with our spinal cord and nerves, our nervous system. Lung cells making up lung epithelial. You see there's little hairs here. That's so these cells can make sure our lung cells don't get irritated. Only lung cells will have this type of ciliation here, is what they call it. Make up our lung cells to make up our respiratory system. I like to think of each cell type as a different instrument in the symphony. The epithelial cells are the trombones. The brain cells, the neurons, may be the trumpets here. So we need to have the right levels of all the things in harmony together in order not to just function and exist, but especially to feel our best. Every single health issue, disease, symptom, or ailment boils down to cellular issues. Our cells are not happy. That makes the tissues not happy. And then that means the organs aren't happy, and then we get these different symptoms. So every health issue, ailment, or disease, or symptom, you name it, comes down to cellular issues. That's why I love educating about looking at health from the cellular level upwards. So let's talk about cell sizes and numbers. So you listening right now, you're made up of between 30 and 40 trillion. That's with a T. Trillion cells. That is an insanely high number. That is over 400 times more cells in just you listening now than stars within our entire galaxy. Let that sink in for a second. And as we see here, cell types vary in size and number within our bodies. So here are some relative sizes. We see an adipocyte. This is a fat cell. These can grow bigger as we get fatter. They hold more fat. They're very big cells versus a stem cell versus a platelet. This is how our cells will clot versus a brain cell here. So different cell types. This is a hepatocyte is a liver cell. Very different sizes and shapes. Then if we look at the number of cells, not all cell types are equally distributed, meaning most of our cells in our body by a large margin are blood cells by the number of cells in our body. Specifically, these erythrocytes, these red blood cells. And we see here, these are pretty small cells, so they probably don't weigh that much. So when we look at the body based on the mass or how much our cells weigh, while we're mostly red blood cells by cell number, we are mostly adipocytes by the mass of the cells. And when you think about it, myocytes are our muscle cells, our skeletal muscle cells here. And these fat cells and muscle cells make up the majority of our cellular weight. And it makes sense when you think about it. Then we have blood, then skin, then brain. So it makes sense when you think about it. But yeah, different cell types, different cell shapes, they got to do different things in the body. Now, cells need to replace themselves. Cells get tired. Cells may not work as well as they get older and they age. We need to replace them. So cells can either take themselves and split into two, or it can replace them entirely. No cell type is immortal, except one, which we'll be talking about in the next slide here, but we renew and replenish these old cells. And the rate at which we turn these over or replace an old one with a new one really depends a lot on the cell type. So we see here, this is a monocyte. This is an immune cell. Every 2 days, you pretty much replace all of your monocyte immune cells in your body. You got rid of the old ones and replaced the new ones, and got rid of the old ones and got some new ones. We see things in the gut, like the colon every 3.5 days, the rectum every 3.5 days. But then we have things like heart cells or brain cells or skeletal muscle cells. These take much longer times to replace themselves. Also, how quickly we turn these over also depends on our age. So we see here, these are skin cells, how quickly they turn over as we age. And as we age, skin cells take a lot longer to turn over. This is a fundamental component of aging, and this is one of the reasons why we can run into more cellular issues as we age. We're not replacing the older cells with newer, fresh ones, so they can make some mistakes, and they could cause some potential issues. So I talked about immortal cells. Let's talk about stem cells. You may have heard this before. People can get stem cell injections. They get these stem cell injections into a problematic joint area. Stem cells renew. They can copy and paste themselves virtually forever. Now, we get really, really old, that may ramp down a bit, but these can not only self-renew, but they could turn into any other cell type in the body. So, stem cells are made and reside in the bone marrow here. And what's really cool is when they're needed, they leave the bone marrow to go to a specific area. So if you need stem cells in your shoulder, your stem cells will know to leave the bone marrow and know exactly where to go. And not just where to go, but what type of cell to turn into. They don't want to turn into a brain cell if there needed to be a connective tissue, a joint cell in the joints. So really remarkable how smart our cells can be. But how do cells know how to behave this way? Cell behavior. How do cells know where to go, what to do, when to do it, when to stop it, and just how to behave, how to do this and how to stop doing this, how to do that, stop doing that. So some examples here. I just mentioned stem cells leaving the bone marrow. They know when to leave and they know where to go at the right time. Our skin cells, how do they know to make vitamin D from sunlight? Our bone cells, we're not born at full size. How do our bone cells know to grow in the right fashion, in the right direction, and know when to stop? When we break our arm, how do our bone cells know that there's a break? How do they know to heal? How do they know to not add an extra third arm when they heal? They do this same proper healing each and every time. Brain cells, when you're stressed or you're anxious, you start having these negative thoughts, you're psyching yourself out. On the flip side, you're around your favorite people, you're calm, it calms you down. You're getting ready to go to sleep. You feel your body go at ease. Liver cells, when we're exposed to toxins, they know to ramp up detoxification, make more antioxidants. Or immune cells, if you have a cut in your finger and there's bacteria or an intruder getting inside the body, how does an immune cell in your foot know that there's bacteria here and we need to go across the body to this exact spot? all these complex cellular behaviors and so much more than just this, it all comes down to cell signaling pathways. This is the cell signaling model of disease course, and we're going to talk about cell signaling. So to start off, what is cell signaling? Cell signaling is the broad set of pathways involved in how cells communicate with each other and within themselves. So how they can tell other cells what to do, how to behave, and also when you're telling another cell, you're telling your buddy, hey, go do this thing. Your buddy is also going to have to listen and receive that messaging. This is what's done by cell signaling. There have been several dozen cell signaling pathways involved to date, and new ones are being discovered all the time. And depending how you classify them, you could say there's over 100 different cell signaling pathways. But don't worry, you're not going to have to learn hundreds of different pathways to improve how you feel. You may only need to tweak and learn to control one or two pathways to resolve and get answers to a lot of your chronic nagging health issues to improve how you feel each and every day. So I like to think of cell signaling as this right here. This is very, very important. So pay attention to this. So we have a marionette, a puppet here, that's being told what to do based on the strings that are being pulled by the puppeteer. Now, how does this relate to cell signaling? Well, I want you to think of our cells. We have around 30 to 40 trillion cells in our body. Each one of them is a puppet. So you have 30 to 40 trillion puppets that make you, that you can learn to control based on what you put in your body, what you subject your body to. So the cell signaling pathways are the strings. So just how a string tells the puppet to move this arm, the cell signaling pathways tell your cells, these different cell types, how to do this versus doing that. And the puppeteer or the hands are our environment. So cell signaling dictates how our cells behave. Every single cellular change in our body is due to changes in cell signaling. So what I want to show you, I want to show you two videos quickly. So here's a street performer that has a puppet. What's he going to do here? Let's see. We have this guy controlling the puppet. You have the strings. He's making the puppet dance a groove. Got some pretty good moves there. And you see, based on which strings are pulled at which times, you can make the puppet do different things. Look at him. Now he's moonwalking here. So I want you to think about this. You have a puppet with different strings. Then these are live cell images of cells. Pictures are taken every few seconds or minutes to create a video. And look what we have here. So we see here we have cells moving. Let me slow that down a bit. Slow this down a bit. Let me stop this one. I'll slow this down real quick. We'll do this at half speed. Look at these cells reaching out, moving. Let's make that even slower. 25% speed. Watch these cells. They're reaching out. They're doing different things. I want you guys to think about the puppet you just saw is the same thing as these cells. We can tell our cells what to do to some extent, right? You can't mind control all of your cells, but we have a lot more power than you think based on the things we put in our bodies to control the puppets, control our cells. Instead of the strings, it's the cell pathways. So what changes cell signaling? Or who's the one pulling the strings? So virtually anything actually can affect our cell signaling. Our genetics can hardwire certain pathways to be overactive or underactive throughout your entire life. Foods we eat, exercise, sleep, drugs, medications, supplements, lifestyle habits, infections, toxins, inflammation, even thoughts. Our cells are constantly altering their cell signaling in response to our body's environment. So you eat McDonald's, you feel like crap. That's a change in cell signaling. You eat a steak, you feel great. That's a change in cell signaling. You get a bad night's sleep, you feel like crap. That's a change in cell signaling. You're listening to your favorite song, your mood goes up. That's a change in cell signaling. You start thinking about how you need to pay rent. You get very anxious. You feel like crap. That's a change in cell signaling. So virtually anything we expose ourselves to changes our cell signaling. And some of these aren't in your control. Your genetics, you can't control what you got, but you can control what food you put in your mouth, what supplements you take, what lifestyle habits you do. So we can control this. We have a lot more control than you think. You need to understand pathway by pathway. Now, the two types of cell signaling here, we have intercellular and intracellular. Now, intercellular is if I'm a cell, I'm talking to my buddy down the street. I'm talking to that cell over there. That's between two different cells. Then we have intracellular within a single cell. And how I always remembered this, inter versus intra, we see the A here is bigger here versus the E. So I think this big area here is the same as a cell. And intracellular means we communicate within a cell, within the A here. So that's always how I remembered it personally. Cells can target themselves, so they could tell themselves what to do. They could tell other cells nearby through something called paracrine signaling. Then we have endocrine signaling. This is where a lot of hormones can come into play. You send a molecule, you send a message through the bloodstream. This is how a cell in your toe can talk to a cell in your finger through long distances. Cells that are in direct contact with each other can also deliver things when they literally touch together. So they don't need to be together. They can actually be far apart and send messages, or they can connect together. Now, let's do some examples of some cell signaling pathways. Now, there is a lot of overlap between these cell signaling pathways and different disease or ailments. In fact, no single symptom, ailment, or disease is ever linked to one single pathway. If you think about it, in order to get your puppet to move, to moonwalk, right, or to dance, or go to sleep, or whatever you want it to do, you don't just pull one string. There are always multiple pathways involved. So here are some examples here. Insulin signaling pathway. The job of this is to take sugar from the blood from a meal and help it enter cells to be used for energy. TNF alpha, tumor necrosis factor alpha. Not going to go deep into this, but the job of this is essentially to wake up your immune cells, to drive inflammation, to take out intruders that shouldn't be in your body. Vitamin D, the most powerful hormone in the body. This has different functions based on the cell type. So vitamin D gets released, your brain cell responds differently than what your bone cell responds to. So we'll get more to that in a bit. But when we have the diseases linked to disrupted cell signaling, we see here, we have insulin. If you can't lower your blood sugar as well, diabetes, type 1 and 2, PCOS, obesity, heart disease. But if you guys look here, TNF alpha, if it's dysregulated, it's also linked to type 2 diabetes. Vitamin D can also be linked to type 2 diabetes. Multiple of these can be linked to heart disease. So my point is, it's not just I need to just fix my insulin to live my best life. Multiple pathways are involved. So many different pathways affect many different diseases. The same pathways can be involved in many different diseases because all they're doing is making our cells do different things. So in summary, our cells or puppets are controlled by cell signaling pathways, which are the strings, by the puppeteer, your environment, what you put into your mouth, what you expose your body to. Many things can affect the cell signaling. So these things, think of these as the puppeteers, right? Genetics, infections, toxins, these are the puppeteers that pull the strings and change how our cells behave and change how we feel. including some that are completely in your control. Again, what foods or supplements you put in your mouth, you put on your body, what lifestyle habits you do. And our cells are constantly changing their cell signaling as we navigate our lives. Dr. Tyler Pansner here, and this is the cell signaling model of disease course. Let's talk about signal transduction. So, what is signal transduction? Signal transduction is the process by which cells transmit information from outside the cell to inside the cell. If you recall this from the cell signaling module of this course, this is intracellular cell signaling. So how does a cell receive a signal and tell itself to change how it behaves? So again, the ultimate change is the cell signaling and therefore that cellular behavior. And I want you to think of this as like a relay race. We'll talk about the steps of this throughout this module, but there is a relay race for each string. If you recall, we mentioned that cell signaling pathways are like the strings that tell our puppets or our cells how to behave. So each signaling pathway has signal transduction. Each signaling pathway has its own relay race. It begins with receiving the message and it ends with the cell changing how it actually behaves. And again, there's a relay race for each string. So I want to talk about the major classes of cellular proteins, or also known as components of the cell signaling, the signal transduction cascade. So we receive a signal. Then the cell receives the signal and it needs to, the relay race, right? We need to pass off the baton to then ultimately change how we respond. So these are 5 different types of cellular proteins. Proteins are the workhorses of our cells. They're made from our DNA that carry out all the jobs in our bodies. And these are some of the types of proteins responsible for signal transduction. So first up, we have enzymes. Enzymes are proteins that conduct chemical reactions inside of our cells. They turn X into Y into Z. So here we see here an enzyme. You'll have the substrates or what it wants to turn into something else. I want to turn this into that. So this binds these enzymes and the enzyme does a chemical reaction to create a product. So this or these got turned into that. These enzymes require cofactors, a lot of times minerals. So in order for this reaction to occur, to fuse yellow and red into orange, you need these cofactors like iron or zinc, magnesium, copper. Now these enzymes, they can process things. So they can create things inside of our cells that stay inside of our cells, or they can create things that we release outside of our cells. Our cells release them. These are called signaling molecules. More on those in a moment. So these enzymes, we have a substrate, we have the ingredient, right? It binds this site here. Then we have something called the catalytic site. So the binding site holds the substrate in place. So imagine if you want to weld these two together, you need to sit them tight. And then this catalytic site, this needs to connect these two together. So these areas can actually be mutated. So these enzymes may not work as well as they should. This is where we're not going to go deep into genetics here, but this is why if you have a mutation in your enzyme, you may not make as much of this product throughout your entire life. So some examples of the enzymes. These are different neurotransmitters. So you may have heard of serotonin. It makes us happy. GABA calms us down. Melatonin makes us sleepy. You see, each arrow here is a different enzyme. So tryptophan, phenylalanine, glutamine, these are amino acids in the foods that we eat, in the proteins that we eat. Different enzymes convert them into our neurotransmitters. Each arrow is a different enzyme. Here we see this enzyme right here that turns phenylalanine into tyrosine. It needs Fe. That's iron. These are the cofactors. So for this relay race, before the race begins, you need to get set. You need to make the signaling molecules. This is step one. Now, the next step in this cascade are signaling molecules. So the race has now begun. We got set, boom, the gun fired off, the race has started, the relay race. Signaling molecules can get released. They're also called ligands or primary messengers. Here's a cell that wants to send a message and make this cell change how it's behaving. Hey, buddy, you're doing this thing, go and do that thing. The cell needs to make signaling molecules and release them. These are produced by the sending cell and released into the extracellular space. So this is the space outside of the cell. Think like a highway. You need to release something on the highway to get to where it needs to be. These usually bind receptors, which we'll talk about next. Some examples of signaling molecules: hormones, testosterone, estrogen, cytokines released by immune cells like interleukin 6 or TNF alpha. They can drive inflammation or get rid of inflammation. Neurotransmitters, as we mentioned, serotonin, dopamine, GABA. Growth factors like human growth factor. That is also a signaling molecule. So our cells are constantly releasing all these different signaling molecules and cells are responding. So we're here now. How does the receiving cell detect the signaling molecule and say, okay, I got your message? That's what comes down to receptors. Receptors are really interesting. I love these things. These are found mostly on the cell surface of cells. So think of these like a baseball mitt. So you have a baseball, like these primary messengers, these signaling molecules, guys, whether it's testosterone, let's say. This baseball is floating around and your cell needs to catch it with the baseball mitt. This is how your cells receive chemical signals from outside the cells. The signaling molecules are released. They float by a cell. They bind the receptor. Aha, the cell can sense it now. So here are different types of receptors. We're not going to dive deep into this. The point I want to illustrate here is that there are many different types of receptors that cells can have. But the overall take-home message here is that cells receive messages. They receive these ligands, the signaling molecules. They sense them by receptors. Now, I mentioned neurotransmitters, right? These are signaling molecules. Well, they also have receptors. Serotonin, adrenaline, melatonin, vitamin D. There are receptors for all of these different nutrients that specifically tell the cell to detect melatonin. A vitamin D receptor will not detect melatonin. A melatonin receptor will not detect adrenaline. They are specific, so cells can tell we have enough of this thing, not enough of that thing. So let's talk about catnip. And you may be wondering, why the heck are you going to talk about catnip right now? Just hang with me. It'll all illustrate a beautiful point I want to make. Catnip, the plant Nepeta cataria. This plant has a chemical called nepeta-lactone inside of it. Cats will inhale this or chew on it and literally get high off of the nepeta-lactone. So here is a video giving a cat catnip. He gave him the bag of catnip. And you'll see the cat will inhale it and just start acting kind of weird and funny. He's high. He or she is high. Acting all weird and funny, this or that. Then eventually, 5 minutes later, this is not what the cat's seeing, not like that. But nonetheless, you get the point here. The cats respond to the catnip. This is because nepeta-lactone is the baseball, the signaling molecule that gets into the body. It binds TRPV1 receptors, a specific receptor in the nasal cavity of cats. Now, why don't humans get high off catnip? Humans don't get high on catnip because humans completely lack this type of receptor. They lack this receptor. So cats, they inhale it, their cells respond to it, and they get high. We inhale it, there's no receptor. If there's no baseball mitt to catch the baseball, your cells are not going to register it and they're not going to respond to it, so we don't get high. Now, you know what animal does have this receptor? Mosquitoes have this receptor. So pretty interesting. This is a study showing catnip essential oil is an effective mosquito repellent because mosquitoes do have the receptor. So they may get high, but whatever it is, whether they're too high and they're feeling too good to bite you, or they're high and they hate it and they run away from you, at the end of the day, cats have the receptor. They get high. Mosquitoes have the receptor. They don't want to bite humans when they sense the catnip. Humans are completely immune to it because we lack the receptor. If there's no receptor, you're not going to sense it. And this is why genetic mutations in these receptors can make your receptor not work as well and lead to potential issues. But not going to go deep into that here. Now, after this, after you bind the receptor, the next step of the relay race is to pass off the baton. Now the receptor relayed the message. Then something called secondary messengers come into play. Secondary messengers are molecules that are released into the cytoplasm, right? Remember, this is a cell with all this jelly-like substance in here. These are released after or due to receptor activation. So the baseball binds the baseball mitt, and then you pass off the baton. So these relay the message to get into the nucleus. The nucleus is an organelle. This is where our DNA is held in here. These are where all our genes are, all our DNA is. So we see here, the receptor, different proteins. There can be multiple secondary messengers. So look, we have relay handoff 1, handoff 2, handoff 3, handoff 4. So this is what I'm saying with the relay race. Different specific proteins to relay this message into the cells. Now, to finish this off, who finishes the race? Transcription factors. So, transcription factors, these interact with secondary messengers. So, you have the secondary messengers, and then once you're inside the nucleus, transcription factors literally bind DNA. They alter gene expression. Now, we're not going to go deep into genetics here. I touch on that in my Genetics 101 course, but a gene is a specific part of DNA that makes our proteins. So you have a transcription factor. It got stimulated from the relay race. Now to finish the race, it binds the DNA and it tells your cells, make more of this gene. Turn this gene into a protein. You see, when we say cells change their behavior, how are they changing their behavior? They're making more of certain proteins and less of other proteins. So that's how you change how you're feeling. They're changing how they behave by changing what genes are turned up or turned down. So the end result can be more of the protein types we just discussed. So sometimes you can have an enzyme make something, and then the end of the relay race is to tell that cell to make more of that same enzyme. So maybe you need to make more receptors. Maybe you need to make more transcription factors. So again, the take home here is the anchor for the relay race is the transcription factor. And the ultimate goal is to change gene expression. Now, a little bit more on gene expression. Every single protein in our cells, in our bodies, is made up by a gene. So here's a cell, here's the cytoplasm, here's the nucleus, here's our DNA. The transcription factors, here's a transcription factor, right? It binds the DNA. It copies the DNA. DNA is the instructions to make a protein. We need to make another set of instructions called RNA that then gets turned into proteins. And as I mentioned, proteins are the workhorses of our cells. Whether it's to make testosterone, whether it's to sense testosterone, whether it's to break down adrenaline, whether it's to absorb vitamin C in our gut, these are all done by proteins. So the initial signal is this transcription factor, is a protein. Then the end response is to create other proteins that tell how our cells behave. And I like to see this here. The transcription factors, the signals that we're getting from signal transduction, tell our cells whether to turn up or turn down the gene expression. People may think of this as genes being on or off. I like to think of it more as more or less. And a beautiful example of this is vitamin D for seasonal depression. Vitamin D tells your cells to make more enzymes that make serotonin and dopamine. So that's why you may feel great after a day at the beach. You made more of these proteins to make more feel-good neurotransmitters and improve how you feel. And on the flip side, winter comes, seasonal depression, your body will turn down how much of those genes or proteins that are being made. So again, putting it all together here, I hope now this makes more sense to you. We have the reception, right? We make this from enzymes, the signaling molecule. It gets caught, right? This is the baseball that gets caught by the baseball mitt. You have the relay race, right? The relay molecule. Then at the end, you have the transcription factors activating certain genes, turning genes up, turning genes down that change how this cell behaves from an outside signal. So, in summary here, signal transduction, or the relay race, is how cells respond to outside signals. The overall flow of this is enzymes in the sending cell will make signaling molecules that get sent on the highway, in the bloodstream, what name you. These are the baseballs that bind receptors. The receptor hands off the baton to the secondary messengers. There can be multiple secondary messengers. That activates the transcription factor that latches onto your DNA, and it tells you to make more or less of certain proteins from specific genes. A cell changes what it's doing by turning the volume up or down of specific channels. So the turn the volume up or down is gene expression of specific channels or genes based on which transcription factor was activated. So that's signal transduction. Hope you learned a lot from this. How's it going? Dr. Tyler Pans there, and this is the cell signaling model of disease course. Let's talk about the big picture. Why should you listening right now care about what I'm saying? This whole new way of looking at how external things, foods, supplements, lifestyle habits affect specific cell signaling pathways to change how you feel. So let's jump into it. So to start, I want you to think of your nagging health issues, no matter how major or minor. Something probably popped into your head. Headache, anxiety, allergies, chronic fatigue, bloating, that blah, blah feeling. These are what I like to call check engine lights. These are more minor symptoms that many of us sadly accept as normal in our world today. Let me tell you, these are not normal. These are check engine lights. And what's that means? That means if your car's a check engine light, you should probably check the engine, right? Something's going wrong under the hood of the car. That's exactly what's happening here with these symptoms. Your cells are crying out for help because the cell signaling pathways are imbalanced. Now, if you have your check engine light on, you should probably get it checked up by a mechanic, right, to turn the light off. So this is like you go to your doctor. Let's say it's conventional medicine doctors. You go to them. What do? You're probably aware of this. They give you medication a lot of the time, right? The medication is like looking at the check engine light and saying, okay, that's cool. We're just going to put a piece of tape over the check engine light so we don't see it anymore. Sadly, that's essentially what's going on here when you just mask a symptom with a pharmaceutical medication. You may not see the check engine light. You may feel good in the short term, but trust me, underneath the piece of tape, the light is still on. Underneath the medication, underneath the symptoms that you can't feel, there is still cellular dysfunction, dysregulated pathways going on that are leading to potential issues down the road, because what happens if you don't address the check engine light? Over time, your car may break down, or in this case, explode into a fireball of death, right? So this I would like to say is like disease formation. These more minor symptoms here, and there's a longer list, but you get the point here. These are the beginnings of disease. You don't just wake up with Alzheimer's disease. The headaches, the brain fog when you're younger eventually turns into migraines, eventually turns into loss of memory, eventually turns into cognitive decline. So not everyone with allergies gets a disease, right? But the point here is these are the check engine lights. If you don't address them, the car breaks down. So the same pathways involved in health are involved with disease. Get to more of that in a moment. But the point here is that here are 4 different signaling pathways that I think are a big factor in a lot of people's health issues. These are also pathways that we really can control that are influenced by foods, supplements, and lifestyle habits that you can learn to control. So if you learn to control these pathways, histamine, glutamate, sulfur, adrenaline, look at the things you could help modulate, help improve with. So these more minor symptoms, the check engine lights, look at all the different things here. We have headaches and migraines, headaches. All of these can be linked to headaches. So if you have headaches and you take a medication, which pathway is it acting on? This is why some people don't respond to a migraine or headache medication or headache protocol. It's not the right pathway. Then we see over time these minor symptoms progress into more major symptoms or diseases. So here we see ADHD. All 3 of these pathways are implicated with ADHD. They also can be influenced for autism type symptoms. So my point is someone with ADHD or anxiety, is it more of a histamine thing? Is it more of a glutamate thing? Is it more of a sulfur thing? So if you can learn to control these pathways, let's just say you have high histamine. You may have symptoms of anxiety or ADHD or asthma. If you're able to work on lowering this by changing how you live your life, you can get improvements in these things. Now, cell types respond differently to the same molecule. So what I mean by this is we mentioned we have many different cell types in our body in the introductory module. So different cell types have different roles, right? Like a brain cell does different things than a blood cell or a gut cell. So think of these as different puppets. Brain, gut, blood, liver, bone, and endothelial cells. These are different types of puppets. Now, they are all controlled by the same pathways. So this is very important, people. All of the puppets, all of the cells are controlled by the same pathways or the same strings. So when you pull, let's just say it's this right arm here. When you pull this string, you don't just pull it for a brain cell. You also pull it for all the other cells, that right arm. So let's give the example of serotonin. You may have heard of serotonin as the happy neurotransmitter. It promotes a more healthy, happy mood, right? Well, that's just what it does for brain cells. So when you when you stimulate the serotonin pathway, when you pull that string and the brain cell raises its right hand, let's say, that stimulates certain brain cells to make you in a better mood. But when your gut cell raises its arm, what does it do? It contracts smooth muscle cells and can regulate bowel movements or digestion. This is why people on serotonin reuptake inhibitor medications, SSRIs, can get gut-related issues because it's not just raising serotonin in the brain, it's also raising serotonin in the gut. Blood cells, it promotes blood clotting, serotonin signaling. For blood vessels, it helps constrict blood vessels to further help that clotting formation. Bone cells use serotonin signaling to promote the formation of bones. So we need that to grow our bones. We need serotonin signaling. Liver cells can get regenerated or heal after injury due to serotonin. So the overall take-home message here is that these different cell types all respond to the same types of pathways. So when you stimulate a pathway for one cell, you stimulate it for all of the cells. And this is why the same pathway, the same single cell signaling pathway, can cause issues or symptoms across the entire body. So here's the right hand I mentioned, right? We want to pull the right hand, lift up the right arm. It's all the same string that all is controlled by serotonin. So the right arm of all of these puppets, all of these cell types in the body, they all respond to changes in serotonin. So this is why you can have side effects for different things. This is why you could take a supplement for one thing and it gives you a headache because it may be helping your gut cell, but it may be too much for your brain cell. You can't control which types of cells respond to nutrients you put in your body. They all get fed the same nutrients. Now, the same pathways are involved with health and disease. So here's a healthy cell. And these arrows are different cell signaling pathways, and the size dictates how strong the signaling is. So the green is the most strongly signaled pathway. That string's being pulled the most for this cell, for this puppet. Then orange, then pink, then blue. Now, what is the difference between a healthy cell and an unhealthy cell or a disease cell? There are no new pathways. It's simply the same pathways that are turned up or tuned down over time. So what made this cell unhealthy? Well, it has more of the pink, more of the blue, less of the green, and less of the orange. So you pull the strings, right? You pull the strings, and then the cell starts behaving a different way. It starts doing unhealthy things. And over time, it eventually becomes a diseased cell. Now, we are a symphony, and this is what I like to call symphonyception. So, if you recall from the introductory module, we talked about how different cell types are like a finely tuned orchestra, right? We need to have the balance between the brain cells and the gut cells and the blood cells. Well, now this is an individual cell. So imagine me. Let's just say I'm a cell in your lungs. I need to have the right balance of my pathways so I feel healthy, I feel safe. Then we also have the other cells around us. So again, I'm going back here. Here's just one cell with all the different pathways that's telling this cell, that's me right here, how to survive, how to act. Then we have other lung cells right next to me. We are all also making up the respiratory system. So my point is, individual cells have their own symphony of pathways that need to be balanced. And then on a larger scale, all of the different cell types in our bodies also have to be in balance with each other. So this is why I say we are a symphony, right? We are a symphony here within a symphony. Symphonyception, I like to call it. Now let's talk about labels versus pathways. So conventional medicine, holistic medicine, functional medicine likes to focus on labels or diagnoses. And this is not a knock at any of these. There's a time and place for all of them, but just sharing what I've experienced and observed here, I like thinking in terms of pathways, not in terms of labels or diagnoses. So again, this is not right or wrong. I'm not better than everyone else that thinks differently. This is simply a different angle to view things that I believe can really simplify things for a lot of people in a lot of different ways. So here I am sharing it. So we have labels and diagnoses, right? But when you pull back the curtain, beneath the label or the diagnosis you were given by your doctor is the disrupted cell signaling pathways. So this is what I like to call a top-down versus bottom-up approach. So if we have the current medical model, it's what I like to call top-down. They look at you as your label, your diagnosis. You have generalized anxiety disorder. We're going to give you medications that help with anxiety. You have ADHD. We are going to give you medications that help with ADHD. Or if it's holistic, we are going to give you supplements that help with ADHD, that help with anxiety. But guys, underneath is the cell pathways. So when they give you a supplement or medication that helps with ADHD, you don't feel better. You feel the same. You feel worse. Which string is it pulling for you, right? So underneath on the bottom, we have the cell signaling pathways. I propose a bottom-up approach where we figure out which pathways are messed up. Is it this pathway that's overactive? Let's bring it down. Let's change the diet. Let's change the supplements. We need to bring this one up. We may want to start doing a different activity in the evening to help stimulate that pathway. And again, from the cell signaling and signal transduction modules, this is the relay system, the relay race, signaling molecules, bind receptors, the relay molecules, and activate different genes. So I don't like the top-down approach. You are more than the label that you were given. You simply have dysregulated, disrupted cell signaling pathways that need to be put into balance. So, quick exercise again. I want you to think of your number one health issue or ailment at this current moment in time. Now think of your second. Maybe you're blessed, you only have one. And your third. If you're a healthcare professional, think of the most common ailment your patients face. What is the number one problem you help them overcome on their health journey? Think of literally any human disease state. Every single one of these has one single thing in common, one common root cause. They all come down to disrupted cell signaling. And learning how to alter the right cell signaling pathways for you allows you to connect the dots about your unique biology, your body, to figure out what you actually need and what you should be avoiding to feel your best, to get actual improvements. And this is exactly what I've been helping my private clients do for years now, but I'm trying to figure out a way to distribute this to the masses so you can figure out for yourself and not have to rely on a nutritionist for any food recommendation or a doctor for any supplement recommendation, so you know your body better than any other doctor possibly could. So let's talk labels and diagnoses versus pathways. So here are two examples here: mental health and autoimmunity. These are two different types of health issues. And below that, we have a lot of different labels or diagnoses. If you have mental health issues, you go to the doctor. They'll put you with the label of you have ADHD, you have depression, headaches or migraines, anxiety, autoimmunity. Hashimoto's, it's when autoimmunity attacks the thyroid. Rheumatoid arthritis, RA, when it attacks your joints. Psoriasis, when it attacks your skin. IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, when it attacks your gut. Lupus can affect the whole body. My point being is these are commonly known diseases or labels. But what if I told you they all involve the same cell signaling pathways? So methylation, you may have heard of the MTHFR gene before. I'm not going to dive deep into this, but that is one signaling pathway. Vitamin D, it's not just a hormone. It's a hormone that stimulates a cell signaling pathway. It pulls a string. Histamine, much more than just allergies. Nitric oxide. What if I told you every single one of these labels is linked to all of these cell signaling pathways? Low vitamin D is linked to literally every single one of these issues, of these labels. High histamine is linked to every single one of these labels. Methylation issues are linked to every single one of these. Nitric oxide. So you guys see my point here. This is why a lot of people with ADHD are also prone to anxiety. Because let's just say we have high histamine. It's linked to anxiety. It's linked to ADHD. Instead of thinking I'm the person with ADHD, maybe you should think I'm the person with high histamine and low vitamin D. And once you categorize it like that, people, think how much more empowering that feels. Now I know I'm someone that needs to work on my histamine and help with my vitamin D. So we have anxiety here. Anxiety is not just one thing. The anxiety you feel is the culmination of many different cell signaling pathways. Anxiety, back to the introduction here, I think with the cell signaling one, where there was the guy doing the marionette with the puppet making a moonwalk. Anxiety is just like telling your cells to walk a certain way. But how do you tell a puppet to walk a certain way? You have to pull specific strings. So when instead of pulling the string this way, you pull the string that way, this is how a cell can go from healthy to anxious. So adrenaline, histamine, serotonin, vitamin D, glutamate, nitric oxide, these are all cell signaling pathways. Some people with anxiety have worse histamine issues. Some people with anxiety have more serotonin issues. Maybe you're more nitric oxide issues. So my point is, when you look at this side, when you look at this side inwards, instead of saying you have anxiety, take a medication or take a supplement for anxiety, which pathway is it? This is precision health. This is really what I believe makes sense. And I've seen help so many people in my practice when you break it down like this. Why are you being put on anxiety medication when you have low vitamin D levels? You should be addressing these pathways before you touch any sort of medication like that. And this doesn't only apply to anxiety. Any diagnosis, any label you have is the culmination of various pathways that you can learn to control naturally. And that's exactly what I'm on a mission to do for you. So, anxiety or depression, these same pathways, people, these are all linked to depression as well, ADHD, OCD. So you guys see how instead of thinking the anxiety, only use stuff for anxiety, I'm someone, me personally, I am a high histamine, high adrenaline person. That's what I've learned about myself. So things that affect my histamine can make me feel really worse really quickly, or they can make me feel better really quickly, depending how it pulls my string. So again, instead of I'm someone with anxiety and ADHD, I'm just giving these examples, easy to understand. I am someone that's prone to high histamine, high adrenaline, and low nitric oxide, let's say. Each person is a different combination of things. We are all unique. This is why people on medications, anxiety or depression meds, why are they hopping on all these different meds? Because you're guessing based on the label, not the pathway. So signaling issues lead to disease. So let's just say this is a signaling pathway. If it's in the proper range, it's not overactive, you're in optimal health. You're thriving. Now, it starts getting overactive, whether it's the wrong foods, supplements, lifestyle habits, toxins. Minor symptoms start to begin, right? The check engine lights go on. You start getting a little bit of headaches once a week or something like that, little bits of brain fog. You leave the check engine light alone. You say, I'll get over it, or it's part of getting old, or I'll take an ibuprofen, I'll just deal with it. Over time, this is very important, the threshold of disease. At a certain point, that cell, you have a cell here that was healthy, the check engine lights go on. At a certain point, the cell goes from being healthy to pissed off, check engine lights, and at a certain point, it tips over into disease. That cell is now a disease cell. When does that happen? That's a very loaded question. We don't know, depending on the person, on the disease. But my point is, at a certain point, the disease has begun. And even before the disease starts, right, you start getting symptoms here. The symptoms start right at the check engine light stage, beginnings of disease. And now here's what's really important as well. The vast majority of the time, when you go to the doctor, when you're sick enough for the doctor, okay, I got to get myself checked out, you're diagnosed with a disease. That is nearly always way after when you initially got the disease. This is why diseases are so hard to treat, because a lot of times they're not caught until it may be too late. So this is limited by our technology. How good are we at diagnosing these things? Something like diabetes, type 2 diabetes, you have something called your HbA1c or your blood sugar, your insulin level. So you could track to see, hey, you're in the check engine light stage, you're pre-diabetic. Now you have early diabetes. Now it's getting severe. That is one of not that many examples where we do have good tools to gauge it on the way up. What about something like Alzheimer's? What about something like cancer? What about something like Parkinson's disease? We don't really have a good way to check that. So sadly, a lot of the times once you're diagnosed, it may be the point of no return. Eventually it progresses, symptoms get worse and worse, and eventually you may sadly pass away due to this severe disease as the pathways get more and more imbalanced. Eventually they can't keep up, they can't cope. So I want to talk about managing expectations here. So something called effect size. Now, I want to be very clear here. I lead by honest science, first and foremost. I am not sitting here telling you this way of addressing your pathway by pathway for food, supplements, and lifestyle is the magic bullet cure-all for everyone's diseases. I am not claiming that. I will never claim that. What this can do, though, you can learn to lower pathways. So if you are someone with a severe disease, you can reduce your symptom severity. Will someone that's all the way up here be able to go all the way back down to thriving? Maybe. I've seen that with some of my private clients, but that's not a universal thing. Sometimes it's, wow, you are, instead of being an 8 out of 10, 10 out of 10 pain every day, we got you down to a 2 or 3 out of 10 pain every day. Maybe this approach alone can't get rid of the disease entirely. I'm not claiming that to be a magic bullet cure, but who this can really, really help are the people at this early area check engine light stage. I've never been really chronically sick. I lived with a lot of check engine lights throughout my life, though. Brain fog, anxiety, headaches, sleep issues. And I was able to completely change my life because I was still in the check engine light stage. I was in my mid-20s when I figured this out for myself. And now I can feel right away when I do something wrong and I get a symptom back. Oh, I have a headache. What did I eat wrong? And I could pinpoint exactly what it was. And that's what I want to teach you all how to do. Now, then there's also single versus multiple pathways. So you may not just address one pathway and fix all of your issues. Maybe some of your brain fog issues are from this pathway, but your headache issue is from that pathway over there. So that's why I say learning to address one at a time, but you may need to experiment a bit and see, oh, that one was really high. I lowered that a lot. I feel better. This one I got to tweak a little bit. And again, I'm sharing experiences I've had in my practice. And another thing to keep in mind here, here's this pilot study. Asthma. Asthma is a disease or label that is associated with high histamine. High histamine signaling is linked to asthma. That is a fact, scientific fact. Here's a study that showed children with asthma, they measured their airways. So here's the histamine signaling pathway. Let's just say it's histamine here. They have higher histamine. That's why they have asthma. Let's just say they're right here. When they ate higher histamine foods, even if they were healthy foods, they would get more swollen airways. Their symptoms would get worse. And guess what? If they ate low histamine foods, they would get lower symptoms. So we already have proof that labels or diseases such as asthma, you can get noticeable, measurable improvements in symptoms, in airway flow by changing what you eat, because changing what you ate affected how much you stimulated, how much you pulled one of those strings. So these children were able to stop pulling their histamine string so hard, stop instructing their cells to be more swollen just by changing some of the foods that they ate. And this is a study that's shown this in one ailment, but out of the people I've worked with, I've seen this affect so many other ailments or diseases in a similar fashion. This is just one that's actually been studied and quantified. Again, this is ahead of the curve, pathway by pathway here. So we can't live and die by what data has been shown. And again, I'm just telling you, I'm giving you more information about what foods and supplements to have. We're not doing any heavy duty pharmaceutical treatments here. So it's really fun to explore your body as well. Cell signaling disruptions affect all cell types. So as I mentioned, if you have excess serotonin or low serotonin, it can affect multiple different cell types. I had to think of it as when you set fire to the string. So let's just say there's too much histamine. When you set fire to the string, all the puppets get burnt. So excess histamine in the airways of children with asthma, they get swollen. Maybe their brain cells, maybe they got more headaches. That's another symptom of high histamine. So when I'm just using histamine as an example, when I have too much histamine, my brain fog comes back, my mind will start racing, I'll be a little erratic, I may not sleep as well, and I may get some headaches. That's how it affects me personally, because the high histamine is it's raising the arm of the brain cell, it's raising the arm of the sometimes gut issues as well of the gut cell. So again, when you set fire to the string, when you mess up one pathway, all of the cells in your body suffer because all of our cells are controlled by the same pathways. So as I mentioned, these are the top 4 pathways I think are really most able to be controlled and I guess hacked if you want. I don't love the word hacked, but we'll use the word hacked here. You can kind of hack these pathways. And again, if any of these things remind you of yourself, like I worked with people that have ADHD and we turn on to the sulfur thing. And sulfur, not only is their ADHD better, but they're like, oh, my allergies got better as well. For example, if you have allergies, you are much more likely to get ADHD. Why is that? Because high histamine from the allergies also affects your brain cells, which can excite them, which can lead to ADHD. So you kind of see the patterns I'm looking at here, people. Now, become the puppeteer of your own cellular health. Drugs, lifestyle habits, foods, vitamins, supplements, our mood, and our environment, these all affect our cell signaling. These all pull the strings. And there's some that can be in your control. You just need to know which foods and supplements and things are turning the pathway up versus turning a pathway down. Based on your unique body, your own genetics and lifestyle, these healthy changes in cell signaling may actually make you feel worse. Why do I do healthy in quotes? 2 people with anxiety. They both take the same supplement that has data at helping with anxiety. One person feels better, the other person feels worse. Well, why is that if this supplement helps with anxiety? How does it help with anxiety? Which pathway, which string is it pulling? If I have anxiety and the person next to me has anxiety, if you pull one of my strings, that may be what I need. That may make them worse. So this is a big reason why so many people live a healthy life. Most of my private clients eat clean. They exercise, they eat all organic, yet they still don't feel great. They don't feel great because very healthy foods can overwhelm certain pathways for you and give you check engine light symptoms and make you feel worse. But you think you're doing the right thing because it's a superfood or it's a supplement you saw on the Huberman podcast. It doesn't take into account your unique biology and your unique pathways. The cell signaling pathways are out of balance. And the goal here is for you to change your thinking. Instead of chasing endless fix X protocols, so let's just say you're a parent with a kid with ADHD. I tried this doctor's ADHD protocol. I tried that doctor's ADHD protocol. I tried this ADHD from a workshop I did. It's focused around the ailment. This protocol that you're trying, which pathways does it affect? I'm very confident you don't know the answer to that. The person giving the protocol may not know the answer to that because they're just looking at things. Oh, this helps with ADHD. How does it? Which pathway is it affecting? Or don't try to look and say, I have headaches. I got the number one supplement for treating headaches from a TikTok ad. Well, they just want to sell you the supplement. Is that really what you need? And the goal here, having courses around these pathways and have a cheat sheet. I want you to be able to log all the foods you have, when you have them, all the supplements you have. I want you to monitor how you feel throughout the day. So for example, let's just say you map out your foods and supplements and you realize, wow, I have a high sulfur supplement right when I wake up. I have a lot of sulfur for breakfast and I have some other sulfur supplements with breakfast. And you look at some symptoms of excess sulfur signaling. Oh, well, what do you know? You map it out. I have brain fog pretty much the whole first half of the day. These are examples of things that I've helped people understand and see in their daily life. This could be you could take this to any nutritionist and they could tell you this is all very healthy food to eat, but it's the wrong food for you because it's too much sulfur for your body. I want you to be able to map out the cause and the effect. People, there is no such thing as random brain fog or random headache. There's honestly no such thing as waking up on the wrong side of the bed. There is always a cause and an effect. Nothing is random with our cells. And this is aimed at teaching you a whole new level of self-awareness to learn, I felt good, now I don't feel good. What did I do to my body? Oh, I did that thing. That's high in sulfur. That's why I don't feel good. The goal here, again, is to reverse engineer your symptoms and cross-reference what you put in your body. See what works and what doesn't, and tweak the right pathways naturally based on your unique body. Now, a question I get a lot is, how do you know which pathway to start with? Well, there's a lot of overlap here, right? So it's hard to say which pathway is the best to start with, but genetics, I mentioned genetics play a role in this. I like utilizing genetics with my private clients to figure out right away, is it more of a histamine issue? Is it more of a sulfur issue? Is it more of a glutamate issue? We have a lot of data on these genetics, but the goal here is to not gate this behind genetics. They can help expedite the process, but this is supposed to be something that doesn't need to be done with genetics, a whole new level of self-awareness and self-experimentation. So, in summary, imbalanced cell signaling. It pisses off our cells. Eventually, the check engine lights go on, the symptoms, the minor symptoms. They progress over time and eventually form into disease. Every single cell in your body responds to the same cell signaling pathways, meaning all of the different puppets in our body. When you want to lift up the right arm of your brain cell, all the other cells in your body will lift up their right arm as well. And you better make sure that lifting up that right arm of the other cell in your body isn't doing something too much. This is where side effects come into play, people. Side effects for things. Why you can take something for your brain health, but your gut doesn't feel good. Because guess what? In order to get to your brain, it has to go through your gut. And then it gets distributed throughout your bloodstream, throughout every cell in your body. Every single label, ailment, or diagnosis is made up of many pathways that you can learn to control naturally. Every single cellular issue stems from the puppet strings being pulled the wrong way. And again, the goal here is to give you easy to understand, actionable things you could do to start pulling your strings in the right way, or at least pulling your strings in a different way and learn for yourself. Ooh, I pulled that string. Do not like that. Not a string for me. Okay, try something else. But I want to give you that proper guidance. Very important. This is not a magic cure-all to every disease, but depending on the person, depending on the disease, depending on the severity, this absolutely can reduce symptoms and improve your quality of life. It can, in my experience, sometimes actually result in disease remission, not always, but especially if you're someone in the check engine light zone. You're not super sick, but you have these aches and pains, the little anxiety, this and that. You are someone that can really go from where you're at now to feeling like a whole new person, because you're not so far off the deep end with really messed up signaling. If it's more minorly messed up, these more minor changes can completely change how you feel. And the goal here is to learn to understand your body pathway by pathway to become your own health advocate. So you don't need to go to a nutritionist to say, I have a headache, what food is causing it? So you don't need to go to your doctor and just blindly listen to what they say. Whole other topic, but doctors are not properly trained on supplements. So this will educate you more than doctors are educated on supplements, so you can know you better than any other doctor. So really hope you guys got some value out of this. Courses on the way regarding specific pathway by pathway, so you can learn to control your cells and feel your best. And until next time, thanks for listening.